Hey, Ali, how are you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. So, for everyone who's listening in, this is Ali. I've known Ali for actually a couple of months now. And Ali is very special because she's a social media strategist for health centered coaches and providers. And we're going to be chatting briefly today about social media, which is the one thing that people seem to struggle with the most when it comes to visibility, when it comes to getting online and promoting themselves. So, Ali, hey, can you tell me a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so I am, well, first of all, thank you for the introduction. Second, I am a social media manager and relationship marketing expert. So I like to refer to myself as a relationship marketer than anything else. My focus when I work with clients is all about cultivating and nurturing those relationships with their audience, because I 100% am a firm believer of relationships over sales any day. Those long-term relationships that you cultivate and foster end up being the ones that turn into those long-term clients, and we're all about those recurring revenue and long-term clients anytime we can capture those.
I love how you said that because I'm also a victim of someone who's all about how many people are following me, how many people are liking my posts. And if they don't, as much as my competitor is, then I feel that I'm not doing my job. I'm not reaching the people that I am needing to do that. And this is a mindset shift that I really want to chat about because social media likes and followers does not have any impact on your self-worth or your financial worth.
100%. Yep.
I think that's a huge thing. And I love that you're all about the relationship and relationship building. So, how do people get over that hurdle of making the connection and become visible online? And I'm going to throw something in, be themselves, right?
Mm.
Because I see a lot of people as well just kind of regurgitating what everyone else is doing online. And I'm sure you've seen this as well, just trying to keep up with everybody. So, how can we be individual? How can we be ourselves? $1 million question.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm going to piggyback a little bit off of what you just said in terms of, do I really need to have 10,000 followers? Do I really need to have 5,000 followers, 100,000 followers, so on? And the short answer to that is no. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I have clients, both social media managed clients as well as clients that I mentor, who have like 1,000 followers, 2,000 followers, and they're still bringing in consistent six plus figures per year. So you don't need to have a huge following at all, but you do need to have an engaged following. And so if you're just posting and you're not engaging with your audience afterwards, or if you're not trying to nurture that relationship with them, then you're just going to have a bunch of people out there who are on their, essentially, if you were looking out into a crowd and you were on the stage, they're all looking on their cell phones, not paying any attention to you. And we don't want that. We want them to be engaged with us. So think of a comedian. I know that's kind of a weird one, but when you think of a comedian, how often do they interact and engage with their audience? And all the time is the answer to that. They're really trying to pull their audience into their whole thing as often as possible. And so their audience members are super engaged as a result. And no, you don't have to be a comedian on your social media channels in order to do that, but you do want to kind of think of how they interact with their audience and start to kind of mimic that in your end. You don't have to make fun of your audience. You don't have to make jokes. You don't have to dance. You don't have to do anything silly, but you do have to give them something of value and something that they want to respond to, that they want to engage with. And then you also want to meet them where they're at by engaging with their content, engaging with their stories, engaging with their, sending them messages, and trying to connect with them on a human to human level. Because at the end of the day, humans buy from humans. And that humanity is ultimately what's really going to capture your audience. And the best way to tap into that humanity is through your storytelling and what you're currently living through. So a lot of people are really hesitant to share what they're currently living through, especially if it's a very raw, it's a very sensitive, it's very maybe painful, or you're just not quite ready to talk about it. So I usually recommend to my clients that they journal about it instead. And then in the future, when you are ready to talk about it, you've got a detailed record of what you were going through. So you're still going to be able to talk about it from the heart And that's what really is going to capture your audience. So it's great to follow trends. It's great to try and utilize content that is currently performing quite well, but really it's important to recognize what trends and any viral content out there, that virality usually has a short lifespan. So if you're not catching it at the very beginning, then you're catching it towards the end and it just doesn't have as much of an impact. So you might get frustrated that you feel like you're doing all of these trends. So instead of focusing on that, I usually recommend focusing on just trying to give your audience something of value, sharing something that's near and dear to you and something that you're going through that's relatable to your audience, and trying to tie all of that together so you get that human to human interaction.
That's great advice, because ultimately, like you said, humans hire from humans, and we want that know, like, and trust factor, right? But I think I'm still discovering that as well. And everyone is, how much of myself can I give? How much, what do I want to talk about? Is this relatable to my clients? Do I need to tell people that I'm going through something that is maybe personal? Is that relevant to me in my actual business? But maybe you can correlate that. Maybe there's lessons that need to be learned. Maybe there's a new level of understanding. Maybe there's a more compassion. And this what makes kind of creating your social media posts very, very personal. I want to talk to you about how much, right? How much should we post on social media? Once a day, 3 times a day? I mean, I've seen people posting up to 5 times a day. Have people got time for that? I mean, help me here.
Yeah, talking about another $1 million question. By far, this is probably the #1 most frequently asked question I receive. And my answer is almost always, how often can you commit to?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, I could tell you to post 7 times per day. I could tell you to post a mixture of like 2 reels a day and 3 carousels per day and so many static posts and so many story posts and so on. And there are going to be experts out there that will preach those numbers as if they are like the end all be all of social media. And sure, there are people who can have success with that, but again, taking it back to the relationship side of things, let me put things in 2 ways. One, if you were posting 7 times per day, yes, you are going to have a better chance at potentially being found, at potentially growing your audience, but that's just because of quantity over over quality in that case. That's like literally the spaghetti theory, where people throw spaghetti at a wall and see what sticks. That's essentially what you're doing with those 7 posts per day, is you're just throwing a whole handful of spaghetti at the wall every single day. And if you're lucky, a couple will stick, and next thing you know, you have like 1 million, a post that gets 1 million views. Yeah. Awesome, right? But now you have to try to replicate that and keep that going, and that's just exhausting. So instead, what I usually recommend is, one, considering how much can you honestly commit to do consistently, and then try to come up with a schedule that you can do, and tell your audience about it. So tell your audience, hey, I'm going to be posting on Monday all about this, on Wednesday all about this, and on Friday on all about this, and then commit to that. So that way your audience starts to get comfortable and starts to expect that content. And now you have people who are really looking for what you're sharing. And then also focusing again on relationships. So even if you're only posting once per week, I know myself personally, I had a very active online account, and life got busy. And so my account started to not be posted as frequently, which we all go through that, right? But I consistently, even when I have those down periods, even when I'm not posting as frequently, I still always make sure that I set aside 15 to 30 minutes a day to engage with my audience. And as a result, even during those periods where I'm really not posting that often, my engagement rate doesn't really go down. I'm still seeing growth on the account. I'm still seeing people send me messages. I'm still seeing people connect with me. And so it's still, again, all about that relationship side of things. So when you do a combo, then you usually have the best result.
What I found as well is that even with Instagram, it tends to be a vault of information. So that's why I think it's important to carry on posting as much as you can, and variety of posts that people can come back to you and kind of scroll down and see what you're about. If they are contemplating working with you, then they can have a holistic view of what you are putting out there. I recommend to my clients, as well as creating some great physical design, no, some great posts, great design posts, right? To actually get behind the camera. And because even if you kind of are a bit clunky with what you're saying, there's an energy about you connecting to someone. There's a message, and I'm all about the energy. I know that the right people will kind of hear that, even if you think, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Who's going to hear this? But it's more about the value that you're giving. And how do you feel about that? If you're advising someone, how much should they go live? Well, should they go live? Should they do reels, live on Instagram, live on Facebook? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes. So with Instagram in particular, reels are kind of like the jam right now. And that is the stuff that I am seeing across the board. People are having the best engagement rates from reels. But they're also things that people get the most embarrassed about, right? Because they think they have to dance, or they think they have to like do something goofy in order to have a successful reel. And funny enough, one of my most popular reels is literally me opening up my front door, and I was holding my camera out the front door. So it's me literally opening up the front door, sticking my head out the front door and saying, you know, I saw your hey girl message and I ignored it. Learn my name, it's in my bio. And like it was just like a short and punchy. And it was entirely because I got tired of getting so many hey girl messages.
Yeah.
And that one just hit home for so many people. And I didn't dance, I didn't lip sync, I didn't do anything goofy. I was just myself. I opened up my front door and I talked to the camera, and then I closed the front door. And that was like it. But you don't have to do anything like extreme to have a catchy reel. It's all about, again, finding what's comfortable for you, finding what you enjoy doing, and then sharing value. You know, like I know that's the advice that people hear all the time. And it's because, you know, that common advice that you hear over and over and over again that everybody's preaching. It's because that advice is the advice that typically works for the majority of people. And in this particular case, sharing value is 100% all of my clients. When we make sure we're sharing value, when we're focusing on that, that's when we have the best results. And so, yeah, so anything you're doing, share the value. So I like to say reels for sure. If you're comfortable with it, try the reels. If you're not quite comfortable with reels yet, try going live and talking in your stories, because that only has a 24-hour shelf life. And so it's going to expire. So even if you feel like a goofball, you don't have that pressure, because it's only up there for 24 hours and then it goes away, and you can just start getting more and more comfortable. So I usually recommend starting with your Instagram stories or your Facebook stories or your LinkedIn stories, because they all have stories at this point. Start with your stories, get used to being in front of the camera, get used to sharing value and talking to people. And then when you're ready, graduate up to either, you know, reels or try an IGTV live. And just start getting more and more comfortable. But Instagram has come out and flat out said that it's no longer just a photo sharing app, which means, yes, photos are still valuable on the platform, but they are prioritizing videos more and more. And so if you're not using those yet, then you are going to fall further and further behind. And so you want to make sure you're keeping that in mind in your strategy.
I agree totally. It's about that visual representation of who you are, what you stand for, and it's how to create authentic relationships. I do see a lot of the time on Instagram that people do these dances and they just don't feel comfortable. They're doing it because they should do it, right? And that actually, from a branding perspective, that repels. So if you're feeling that this isn't what you're embodying, then don't do that. Rather do something that really feels like you, so that people can pick up that authenticity, because they're well versed. They have been watching, you know, probably 20 videos before yours comes up. So rather do something that is authentic. The next question that a lot of people have is, what must I post? Because what have I got to say? I don't have time to write a long post. Is that really necessary? What about the content pillars? Let's chat about that a little bit.
Yeah. So when it comes to post and when it comes to what should you post,
Mm,
I generally try to have three main categories.
mm,
And those are, I should say, overarching categories. So you've got your sales content, your kind of like transition content, and your support content. And so your sales content is going to be the content that you think of that is heavy on trying to promote your offers, trying to promote your getting people to make purchases. And then you have your transition content, which is that content that helps to buffer your sales content. And then your support content is more of your personal content. That's the content about your behind the scenes, where you're sharing insight about your life, where you're sharing insight about your family, and so on. I personally refer to these as buckets, but
mhm,
you've probably heard them before as content pillars, content categories, and so on. Um, and usually when you hear of pillars, you'll hear people typically refer to about 4 or 5.
mm,
Um, so I usually say, 3 main buckets, and inside those buckets, you can have, 2 smaller categories if you want. So that gives you up to 6 categories total, 6 buckets. And I want you to think of, like, I always refer to it as a beach when you go to a beach. So your
mm,
support posts are your easy content. That's the content where if you just walked out to the water and you stuck your bucket in the water, it fills up that bucket super quick and super fast, and you can
mhm,
probably think about things to post in your sleep.
mm,
Your transition post, that's your content that's going to help to take your user from that more um, filler content into the more sales content. So your transition posts tend to be more of the educational and more of the like the entertaining and getting people to engage with your content. That's a little bit harder for people. And so think of sand, right? When you want to fill up your bucket with sand, sand has a little bit more resistance. You probably have to think a little bit harder about it. And you
mhm.
might have to use a shovel or like a little, yeah, it's a shovel, hand shovel to fill up your bucket. So it takes a little bit longer to fill that bucket up. And then your third bucket, your sales bucket. Now, this is the one that's the hardest for people, but good news. I usually recommend not doing more than 20% of your posts as sales posts. So you really want to
Yeah.
keep it as a low, you
Mm,
don't want your account to turn into a giant walking
yeah.
advertisement. So when I talk about my sales buckets, I talk about walking around the beach and trying to find the perfect seashells.
Mm,
In these particular cases, your sales buckets, they might never fill up because you might
mm,
only have so much content that you want to share with your audience, because you really want to focus on that value-driven content. And so if you're doing, let's say, 4 value-driven pieces of content and 1 sales piece of content, you're not going to need as many seashells in that bucket as you will need sand and water. And so with those ones, you can walk around the beach and, just fill up your bucket as you feel like you need it
mm,
with those seashells. So that's kind of a quick and dirty way of
mhm,
breaking that
mhm,
down and focusing your content primarily on those support content. So people get to know who you are. They get to see the like
mm,
behind the scenes,
mhm,
because your personality and who you are as a person is what's going to attract people. Then your transition content, that educational, that value driven content, that's what's going to keep them,
mm,
because now they're hooked on what you're talking about and they want to learn from you. And then your sales content, aiming for about 20% of that. So if you've got 5 posts for the week, just one of those is a sales post. This way you're now converting your audience, because we don't want to not talk about our sales offer, which is
yeah.
probably one of the biggest things I see people do, is they don't want to talk about their sales and they
Mhm,
don't want to talk about how you can work with them. Because if you do that, if you don't talk about your sales offer, then nobody's ever going to know how to work with you. So you
mhm,
have to talk about those. And but you don't have to talk about them nearly as often than you think. And I usually recommend about 20% of your posts should be those sales posts.
I agree. The sweet spot is always that 80-20 ratio where 20% you're selling, 80% is giving value, sharing more of yourself. Um,
Exactly.
and it seems to work for me as well. You need to have that balance, and it feels good as well to actually share more of yourself, because you're creating the relationship.
Exactly.
You don't really want to think, I want something from you all the time, right? No one wants that. It's like that hey girl posts or hey girl messages. You want to have a relationship building on social media.
Yep.
And then briefly, I wanted to chat about some of the platforms that people use on social media that, people get stuck on that. So there's obviously Canva. People use that quite a lot in getting their social media posts. I use Later to schedule posting. What other platforms would you suggest that work for people?
Yeah, so it's going to depend the platform you're using. I personally tend to use Creator Studio for Facebook and Instagram. And that is Creator Studio is Facebook's default platform. So it's a free platform. You can literally go, you can just type into your search engine, search like Google Creator Studio, and you can create a free account or activate your free account if you already have a Facebook account. And then you can just start posting. And the cool thing about Creator Studio above any other platform that's out there is it's currently the only platform you can use to schedule carousels on Instagram. Most of the other platforms at the moment require you to do a manual post. And it's also currently the only platform that will schedule, and I should say schedule and auto post, not just schedule, but they auto post carousels and they schedule and auto post IGTVs. And so, so none of the other platforms out there at the moment can do that, can accommodate that. I don't know if those platforms will have that functionality in the future, but if I was also speculating, I wouldn't be surprised if Creator Studio ends up getting some other functionality and features before the other platforms, because it is Facebook's default and native platform. So it tends to be the one I use. Plus the fact that it's free is fantastic. You don't have that month-to-month membership or annual membership. If you are looking at Pinterest, then Tailwind is the platform to use for there. That one is a membership one. Pinterest does have a default scheduling tool built into the application that you can use, but it's not, it is a little bit buggy at the moment. So I'd keep an eye on that one. And then if you're using something like LinkedIn as an example, then you could potentially use Canva is a good one there. You can also use like really just about any platform. So Hootsuite, I've used MeetEdgar, which is also an evergreen platform. I've also used, what was the other one? I can't remember the name right now. Buffer, I think it was.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I can't remember the name right now, but there was another one I used. So LinkedIn is a little bit more flexible in terms of what you can use to schedule content through them. So I usually recommend Creator Studio for Facebook and Instagram, Tailwind for Pinterest.
I didn't know about that. So that is great, that Creative Studio. So I'm going to look into that for sure, because some of these platforms are limited, and you want them to be able to take the pressure off. In other words, timing and scheduling, because that's a big thing. I know that I'm in South Africa, right? But my audience is in the US. So I know that I need to start scheduling 6 p.m. later in the evening. That's the time. That's my sweet spot. So it's a good idea to find the sweet spot for your audience as well. Ali, I believe you have over 120 page free content calendar workbook on your website.
I do, yes. Yeah, so if you are really struggling with trying to figure out your content calendar or trying to figure out your content plan, I do offer, I believe it's now over 150 pages, because I just updated it for 2021. Well, not just, I updated it like back in January for 2021. So I think it's at 150 pages now. But yes, completely free. And you could just go to supremelyou.com and scroll to the bottom of the page. You can opt in right there. You'll get it in your inbox. More than that, when you opt into the content calendar, you'll also get a free mini class that goes along with it. So that usually gets your email the next day. So the first day you opt in, you'll get the calendar. The second day, usually 24 hours later, you'll get access to the free mini course. So that way you can optimize your content calendar and really take it, to that next level. So you start to feel more and more comfortable about posting.
That's pretty cool. And when you're on Ali's website, do take a look. She's got a program coming up as well. So take a look at that. Ali, thank you so much for your time and your expertise and your incredible energy. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I really enjoyed the conversation today. So thank you.